Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's council meeting. I'm calling it to order at this time and going to begin by asking Councillor Greenfield to read our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, good afternoon. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nation, and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We want to extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis people and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend to these waters.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to acknowledge that today we have a deputation concerning our land acknowledgement and also a motion from the Deputy Mayor concerning our land acknowledgement. Now, I'm just going to invite you to join me in a moment of silent reflection on today's business. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? I see none, but if it occurs to you, please bring it forward at that time. Announcements. Any announcements around the horseshoe? Start with Councillor Uhrig.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, on April 25th, the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, they sent out information about a sustainability summit that's going to be happening. It's hosted by the town of Blue Mountains. It's going to happen at the Blue Mountain Village Conference Center. Anyone that is interested, obviously sustainability is a big concern that we all have, and anybody that wants to learn more about how we can get to this feasibility of a green economy hub. They're going to be discussing the economic, social, and environmental kind of concerns and ways to get there. So the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, it is hosted by the town of Blue Mountains. Anybody that's interested in any more information can go to exploreblue.ca, and there will be a sustainability summit link there that they can find out more about the actual forum. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that Director of Development Services, Rob Voigt, is going to be at the event, I believe. And I personally can't make this one, but and I know the Deputy Mayor can't either, but anyone who can is certainly encouraged to do so. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of announcements, if I may.
Go right ahead.
The Meaford Theatre Company is presenting Norman Foster rendition, Self-Help. This will be up at Woodford Hall. The showtime is 7:30 in the evening. And they're going for 6 nights for this, April 18th, 19th, and 20th, and then 25th, 26th, and 27th. So it's supposed to be a lot of fun by a great author. And if I may, the Meaford St. Vincent Ag Society is holding a beef dinner Saturday, April 27th. There will be 2 seatings at 5 and 6:30. 4 tickets, 519-538-1694, and this is an early fundraiser for the fall fair, and they even have takeout available. Thank you, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, everyone. 2 announcements as well. I promised at our last meeting that I would come back with more information on the annual spring cleanup that is hosted by the Rotary Club of Meaford. That's taking place on May the 4th at beginning at the Rotary Pavilion, and if people could gather at 10 o'clock, and we'll try and be finished by 2:30. This began back in 2016, and this is our annual baggie event. And just want to express appreciation to our fire department, who always come out and assist us to be there to gather any sharps or extra large objects or anything that's found that's questionable. So hopefully everyone can come out and support the cleanup on May the 4th. And secondly, the Riverside breakfasts are back. was out yesterday. It was just a fabulous breakfast with barbecued meats done outside and brought in, and eggs and homemade tomato aspic and baked goods and so on. So they really put on a great breakfast out at Riverside. It's $15. And the date of the next one is May the 12th, which is Mother's Day. So I hope everyone will put that in their calendars and bring mom out for a special breakfast at Riverside. Thank you.
Anything from this side of the horseshoe? Anything from the other side of the horseshoe?
There is. I've got a few things to update you on today, and I'll start off with tomorrow's volunteer appreciation event. We, of course, do this every year and to celebrate the great work done by our community members to make Meaford the best place that it possibly can be to live, work and play. The event coincides with National Volunteer Week, which runs from yesterday, April the 14th, through till April the 20th. At the event tomorrow, we'll also be awarding our annual Community Builder of the Year award. So we're looking forward to seeing all of those who've registered to there tomorrow evening at Meaford Hall. Also this week, as part of Volunteer Week, is the Volunteer Recruitment Fair. We'll be hosting our first annual Volunteer Recruitment Fair on Thursday in 2 sessions between 11 a.m. and 1 and between 4 and 6 at the Meaford Public Library. That's Thursday, April the 18th. This initiative stems from an action item in the municipality's wellbeing plan, with the goal to offer an event for those interested in volunteering to discuss opportunities with those not-for-profit and registered charity organisations seeking volunteers. We encourage everybody to come, even if they're not ready to commit to volunteering right at this moment in time. It's also a good opportunity to connect with some of the local community groups and learn more about the services that they offer. The fair is free to attend with no registration necessary, and there will be free refreshments, snacks and live music. You can see more information at meaford.ca/recruitment fair. Some very, very good news that I know certain members of council have already been interested in. As of today, reduced load restrictions on municipality of Meaford-owned roads have been lifted. Roads are vulnerable to heavy vehicle damage in the early spring when frost is leaving the ground. And so we put load restrictions on to help minimise the damage. But thankfully, the weather is improving. And so we're able to lift those restrictions today. And thank you for everybody who's abided by those over the last few weeks. Other good news, we have been successful in receiving grant funding through the Pollution Probe program in the amount of $99,999 for the proposed level 3 EV chargers at the 28 Nelson Street parking lot. The funding's in addition to the Charge Ontario grant funding that we've also applied for, and we're still waiting for a response on. If we're successful with both grant applications, we'll have received total funding for just about 90% of the total project cost, which is a wonderful thing. So fingers crossed on a second application. It's a great step in completing one of council's priority projects focused on sustainability. And then finally, council had the opportunity to meet last week at the closed meeting, but I'd like to welcome Kirsten Higginson, who joins us as the Pump Storage Project Administrator. Kirsten will be the initial point of contact for the Pump Storage Project and will take a key role working with the Pump Storage Advisory Committee. So lots of members of the public will get to know her quite well as well.
Thank you, Matt, and congratulations on the first grant in connection with the Nelson Street parking lot. I just remind everybody that it is not councillors who write grant applications. It is staff. Anything else? Then I'm going to move on to public participation. Members of the public are always encouraged to provide council with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released and will be limited to 10 minutes. If a member of the public wishes to make a deputation on items on the council agenda or ask a public question of council, they may do so either in person at the council chambers or remotely via Zoom, phone or internet. Members of the public wishing to make a deputation or to ask a public question are to register in advance with legislative services by 10 in the morning on the day of the meeting by contacting Deputy Clerk at meaford.ca or calling 519-538-1060 extension 1100. An email with access information will be sent to those who register for remote participation. Deputations are limited to 5 minutes and public questions to 2 minutes. And just a reminder, the public can watch this meeting live via the Municipality of Meaford's YouTube channel, www.meaford.ca/YouTube. We do have a deputation today, and I'd like to call to the microphone, Michael Ashmore. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Madam Deputy Mayor, Council, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The subject is an item on the agenda where a motion is being made to send the land acknowledgement for consideration to the First Nations. I believe all Canadians are equal and any laws enacted should ensure that remains. The land acknowledgement that currently stands in the municipality of Meaford is an insult to all treaty people in that it gives preference to those that it should not and ignores those that it should include. The Saugeen Ojibwe Nation did not exist until 1996 or so and is a union of two Chippewa bands, the Saugeen First Nation of Chippewas and the Chippewas of Nawash. These were involved in the 45.5 Treaty of 1836, which included the old Sydenham Township up to the St. Vincent town line. None of these were involved in the 1818 Treaty, again with Chippewa tribes, which included 6 townships in Eastern Grey, St. Vincent being one of them. The boundary of St. Vincent was established prior to Treaty 45.5, which means, of course, Son is not part of St. Vincent. So if I stand in St. Vincent and do a land acknowledgement, should I acknowledge Son? The answer is no on history. The town of Blue Mountains acknowledges several additional Indigenous tribes, including the Anishinaabe, Adonsay, and Wendat, to which Petun and Huron could reasonably be added, as well as the Métis and Inuit. I've seen maps with the beach name in Meaford called the Petun Fish Camp. I believe they were related to the Iroquois. Why are these people not included in your land declaration? The Meaford Land Acknowledgement is supposed to be based on the UN and Canadian Charter recommendations of 1982 and 2021, which states that such acknowledgements should not cause a loss of equal rights to any other body. In this case in Meaford, why have the residents of Meaford not also been invited to be equal partners with TCE, especially as we have been volunteered to be willing hosts without our approval? I would request the county and the town to perform a judicial review of their policies before they spend a lot of money defending this policy. After the review of an independent committee of interested parties, including a First Nations member, be set up to a detailed approach to come up with the final land acknowledgement. In the meantime, why don't we cancel the current land declaration as legally and factually indefensible? I thank you. It's a lovely spring day.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for your interest in this subject and your presentation. And I assure you we are going to be making a change in it in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ken.
Are there any public questions today? Okay, just a reminder that you can always ask a public question at a council meeting as well. Council inquiries. Do we have any inquiries for staff today? Boy, we're just sipping along. Oh, sorry, Tony? Councillor
Thank you,
Bell.
Mr. Mayor. And on the announcement of the load limit being lifted, how is the general public and contractors going to know that that's been lifted? Modifying the signs or something like that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there is some communication that's going out, if it hasn't already, just on the usual places, so websites, social media, etc. And the signs will come down like usual. It just might take a couple of days for that to happen.
And I think most people are aware, but the county lifted its load restrictions effective today as well. They announced that last week. Okay, if there's nothing further, let's move to our consent agenda. We have 3 items here, and I'm wondering if we
They're all new items
They're all new.
under 8.2, so we'll have to deal with them separately.
Okay, then I need a motion for item A. Moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Bartley. And the recommendation is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, supports the appointment of the following members to the 4 community appointee positions on the Grey Bruce Detachment Joint Board. A, Michelle Reynolds, Township of Georgian Bluffs. B, Carl Ellis, Township of Southgate. G, Jerry Solrish, Township of North Bruce Peninsula. And D, Nicole Martin, Municipality of Grey Highlands. 2, supports the provision of administrative support to the Board of the Township of Georgian Bluffs. Number 3, supports the creation of part-time staff resource employed by the Township of Georgian Bluffs with costs to be shared evenly amongst the 9 participating detachment parties. And number 4, requests that the detachment board's 2025 operating budget be prepared and circulated to all participating bodies prior to the commencement of 2025 budget deliberations. We got that's on the floor? Okay, then we are open for discussion. Councillor Forder.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So when we look at the applications, an important thing to note is that Meaford didn't have any applications for this. So I just want to make sure, do we as a municipality feel that we communicated this well enough so it reached all of the residents? And what could we do to encourage greater participation, knowing that in the next term for this board, that the townships that have not been appointed will get preferential treatment going forward. So I'd just like to get a comment just to see what that's all about. Thank you.
I think we can do more. The timing on this one didn't quite sync up with all of our other committee applications, which we know were really successful in the number of applications that we got. And so this particular board position wasn't advertised in exactly the same way. I'm not totally surprised that we didn't have anybody, even if it had been fully advertised, because we haven't had a police services board in 15 years or so in the municipality, maybe 10. And so it's not something that particularly our residents are used to seeing, whereas in all of the other areas involved in this joint board, there has been. So at least some of those names I know already as people who've been on boards before. I think that now we know that this is what's happening. When we get to the next round of applications just after the election in 2026, we'll be able to absolutely include this as part of our regular thing and make a bit more of an effort to make sure we find somebody so that we get a representative next time as is intended.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just a little follow-up to my fellow councillor. On the initial March the 12th meeting of those members that have been appointed to be on this newly formed police services board, seemingly those that were gathered there kind of pointed to myself and made me the chair of that first go round, which took me by surprise. But we made our way through it through a closed session to pick the members that have been mentioned today for our approval. And without saying what was actually discussed in a closed session, Councillor Forder, you talked about how we can have a look in the future at other representatives. I can tell you that the folks that are on the board were very conscious of having that. This is a large footprint area, and anyway, there was good consideration to all of the applicants. And if you read the report and my own notes on it, I think there was something in the neighborhood of 16 or 17 that had applied. And one was disqualified. I think they had an application come in from, I don't know whether it was Africa or Australia or somewhere. So I don't think they had quite made the grade on that one. But anyway, that's it's going to be quite a board. And when we were all finished on that day, to be quite frank with what our interim CAO has mentioned, we actually ended up with more questions than answers on that first one. You read the report where it talks about budgetary impacts. We talked about where to meet. how to do that in a very good manner. We've been working with Georgian Bluffs, and they've been doing an outstanding job. And I know they've made contact with every one of the members that they belong to this endeavor. But even on that first one, when they had some folks that had joined us by Zoom, it was difficult, couldn't see it, couldn't read their names. There were those that were present. And when you have a board structure, I think my notes are 17 or 21 might be on the board. It's quite a few. 16 on the board. And so when you get that kind of dynamics happening, there's a lot of logistics that's got to be worked out. And to that end, also, there are a series of courses. You read the report. The first course that, since I've been named to this, is got to take a 2 or 3 hour session on the roles and responsibilities. If I don't do that and don't pass that, I could go to the meeting, but I couldn't vote. So I think I'm going to take the course and do my best to pass it, so I'll be able to represent and vote. And then after all of us have to do this, you read about, there are, in the second module, there are four areas that we have to accomplish. One's on human rights, another one's on systemic racism, another one's on diversity and inclusion. And last, but certainly not least, is the rights and cultures of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. So there's a lot to be done on this. And the last note that I had was last Thursday when I was sent information that said, with my password that I have, if I take the course at this point, there's no certificate saying that I've actually completed the course, and I'm to take a photograph of it and to send it on so I don't have to take it twice, hopefully. So you can tell by my comments, the infancy of this, as far as pulling it all together, and the dynamics are great. And yet, the report was accurate. This started back in 2019 to make a change. So we are talking about those that gave us power to be in these very seats, the province of Ontario and the police force, and it's got a lot to it. So hopefully in the future, I'll be able to make some reports on this, how it's going. And when we left our first meeting, we did not schedule a next meeting. We are thinking possibly May at the earliest, but likely in June. So I hope you all support those that we have selected and support the layout that has been brought for you in the report today.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment initially. First of all, congratulations to Councillor Bell. Great stuff, Tony. And I think likely the reason that we did not have applications from our residents was because everybody knew Tony Bell was going to be there for us, and I'm sure he will represent the entire municipality 110%. And thanks for the update, Tony. Reading through the report, it seems a bit convoluted. Like this is going to take some time just to get into low gear, let alone into full speed. Do you have any projections as far as a timeline? Like, are we looking at fall before things really get rolling? I hope sooner, but or maybe it's too early to tell.
Mr. Mayor, well, to that, my fellow councillor Greenfield, I can tell you this, that there's a wholehearted effort on everyone that's involved up until this point. And I know that the police themselves are very anxious to get this in place, because when this is in place, the former agreement with police forces is basically out and the new one is basically in. And to do that, in order to move forward with in our case, the OPP, they're more than anxious to get at this, to get things started, to have meetings, to get some dialogue happening on all of the issues. there are things also that have changed just in the basic crux of why this was basically started. One of them was the chiefs of police have been looking for a mechanism where if members of the police force have done things poorly or wrong, they're looking for being able to have loss of pay. And we had a brief talk about that, but we can't circumvent the police union, but had been talked about if they're out of uniform versus being in uniform. And another comment was rendered that the province of Ontario may institute an inspector general who will look at the chiefs of police, the force itself, and even the board members. So there is a lot that's going to transpire in this. And I can tell you though that those that were at that first meeting, we all decided that it was of such great importance. We're going to make it happen as soon as we can. And just reading through the report, the Township of Georgian Bluffs has been outstanding. The clerk and the deputy clerk, they've been outreaching and they're a good group. We just need to know where we're going to meet. And it has to be a good venue. And when that happens, we'll be moving forward as soon as we can, Councillor.
I'll start with Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And again, congratulations, Tony. You're well represented. Probably a question to the clerk or the Matt. We were on a 5.1 contract versus a 10. So does this up our costs and or does it up our coverage?
I'm glad you remembered which section numbers of the old act it was, because I always get them the wrong way around. So, but yes, we were a 5.1 community, which basically meant that because we officially hadn't made a choice about policing, the OPP automatically became our policing service. Whereas under Section 10, municipalities entered into a contract with the Ontario Provincial Police to perform policing functions. Up until 2017, that had quite a fundamental difference in terms of how billing happened and what policing took place. But after the billing model was replaced in 2018, there fundamentally hasn't been a difference between the two, except for the fact that we haven't had a police services board and we were unable to ask for enhancements from the OPP in terms of additional policing. But the base level of policing was the same for both types of communities. The new law that is creating these detachment boards eliminates that distinction. There's no more 5.1 and Section 10. Nobody will now enter into a contract with the OPP. You'll just say, I'd like to be an OPP community, or I want to run my own police force, and that happens. So yes, it will mean that there is no even theoretical distinction between communities under this detachment board. Everybody will be treated the same, everybody will be policed the same. Our understanding is that the billing model won't change at all. It will still be based on a 3-year rolling average of call costs and central costs and a per household fee. And I think we've noted in the last couple of budgets, our costs per household have actually been going down through policing for the last 2 or 3 years, which is a really good thing. Where there are some additional costs that we've budgeted for this year are to actually fund the Police Services Board. As Councillor Bell is describing, there's quite a lot going into this. We as municipalities have to pay for the training that the members have to take. We have to pay per diems for community and provincial appointees and travel costs and so on. So we put $5,000 in the budget this year, and that was pretty much a guess based on what others were spending on PSBs in their communities. It does look like, based on some of the information that has been gathered and put together now by a wider group of clerks across the community, that we'll likely be at $10,000-ish a year to cover the costs of all of this from 2025 onwards. But compared to our $2-point-something million bill for policing as a whole, it's an additional cost, but it's not significant.
I think, okay, and Tony, you're okay. Any other questions? You ready to vote? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The second item, the recommendation is be it resolved that bylaw 2024-16, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 60-2009 of the municipality of Meaford pertaining to lands known as 165 Kiowana Beach Road, be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Need a mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Forder. Discussion. This is an H1 removal. Is there anything to be said here of importance, or are you ready to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. And the third item on the consent agenda, the recommendation is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford accept the petition for drainage signed by David Desker, Kathy Campbell, and the Municipality of Meaford, submitted under the authority of Section 4 of the Drainage Act. 2, direct the clerk to send notification of this decision to the petitioners, the Grace Auble Conservation Authority, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And 3, appoint R.J. Burnside and Associates as the engineer under Section 4 of the Act to validate the petition and prepare a preliminary report under Section 10(1) of the Drainage Act. Need a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Yorick. Discussion? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to say, I've been through this report, I think 3 times, Director Wiley, and I find the whole process just a lot of steps, a little bit confusing. I tried to write down all the steps as I could pull them from the report, but I just wondered, Jessica, if you would take a minute and kind of walk us through the steps of this, because it appears to be a little complex, and I'm not sure if it's as complicated as my mind is making it.
Through the chair, I would like to say I can do my best to make it less complicated. But the process is through Meaford and has been the way it is forever, so I'll do my best. Essentially, you petition a municipal drain in instances where there are drainage problems. So I think that's the easiest way to look at it, is you are a homeowner or a property owner and you are experiencing drainage issues. You really have a few options under the Drainage Act. One is to work with your neighbors and enter into what we would call a mutual agreement drain. That really just means that it kind of just impacts 2 people, maybe 3. You can get a lawyer to do up an agreement, and it's just, you know, we're both good with having a swale, we'll both maintain it, and that solves the problem. You registered on title, so if I sell my house, it's still there. They're more simplistic challenges, I would say. It's still in the Drainage Act, so there's a process for that it would come to you guys. Still need someone to, or both parties to be okay with it, but it's kind of smaller challenges. The second is a petition drain, which is what you're looking at today. Generally larger drainage challenges, and there's not always clarity on what the problem is, I guess is the best way to put it. So in this particular instance, there are landowners who are experiencing water challenges. But what the drainage area is that's creating that problem is kind of unknown. So the process is really just them saying, we have drainage challenges. We've probably looked at whether we can solve it with our neighbors or do whatever other process there is. That isn't necessarily going to happen. So please, Drainage Act, can you help me find a solution? This is the first step of that, is just saying, I am a resident and I have drainage problems. Can you please help me? And here we are with a report identifying that there are challenges, and we're looking to enlist an engineer to help us figure out where the water is coming from, who should be involved, and how to solve it. Hopefully that's helpful.
Councillor Bartley and Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. So Jessica, I've been down there a couple of times. And even though it says on the sign as you leave Bayshore Road, private property, do not enter, no trespassing, I entered. I went down to the houses that are marked twice, nobody home. I talked to two other neighbors down there. They knew of no issue. Is the issue on Bayshore Road or is it down on the private road? Do you know what the issue is? Because the drain along that section of the road looks the same to the whole road all the way down to the end. So what is the issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is the hardest part about these type of applications is I don't know. So what I do know or what people know is that they're experiencing challenges. So you'll notice that we've signed the petition as a property owner. Because we do experience, I would say seasonal flooding on Bayshore. In a couple particular locations along the roadway, and we have our thoughts about why that might be happening, but again, it's on private property, so we can only control what's in the road allowance. And that's the point of the process is those two other properties are also just receiving a lot of water often, and it's running through private property, and there's not much they can do to control that. The road itself is private. There's infrastructure under the road, which we don't and they don't have any ability to alter, upgrade, do anything to. So this process then takes all of the boundaries away and just looks at what the problem is and how to find solutions for it. So do I know exactly where the water's coming from? Some thoughts about where it might be, and there's some challenges with some private stuff, but that's the point, is to find out what's going on.
If I may, there was hardly any snow melt this year. I mean, there just wasn't any snow, and that's why there was no problem. As I said, this is a real problem area. I've been down there when, you had to try and find some solid ground to walk on. It's so anyway, I think that's the reason it's not so bad this year, but other years it can be. Councillor Ford.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, just a comment. This is very helpful when we look at the map of the area of concern, location of concern as it's listed. I think it would be helpful also to include some photos of the flooding itself so we could actually visualize what it looks like sort of at its worst. Just sort of my feedback is I was really hoping that there would be some photos so I could actually see exactly what the problem was. But that's pretty much all my comment. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Jessica. Jessica, currently, is there any kind of a swale or a ditch between these two properties, or is it fairly level, or?
Through the chair, yes, there is. Like I'm going to say ditch. It acts as an outlet. So like all the water is coming through private property over the private road and kind of through that section in between the two homes, if that makes sense. The topography is challenging too, because it's the low point at the water, whereas very quickly becomes fairly high grade above Bayshore Road. So it's just generally like the geography is tricky as well. But a lot of the water currently is flowing through a ditch on private property and then into a culvert under a private road into that outlet in between the two houses, if that makes sense.
Other questions? I think there's some merit in the investigation, because I think there's all along there's a lot of and typically driveways get washed out in some of these floods. So yes.
One last thing to that point, actually. So thanks for triggering my memory. This is slightly different than the last one that you saw as well in the petition standpoint. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Only drainage nerds like me were excited about it back in the day. But this specifically is requiring a preliminary report. So Section 10 of the Drainage Act has the ability to do a bit of a pre-con before getting into the weeds right away. The nice part of that is that it will help notify people who may be involved at this stage, as opposed to waiting until a lot of the engineering is done and they're finding out that way. For all of these reasons is some people might be included and they don't even know, and the point of including the preliminary report is to identify who might be involved, but also give a ballpark estimate on price, because that is the number one question when we're dealing with these things is what is it going to cost? So that is slightly different in this rendition, but I thought it was beneficial just because there are a lot of smaller properties involved. It's just a bit of a different area than just an agricultural, a few hundred acres and a ditch in the middle of it kind of thing. So I hope there's some value to that, but those are the number one questions. What's it going to cost and who's involved? So hopefully we address that early.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Jessica, for your explanation. I've been down here too. I know the area in question, and thinking of the property across Bay Shore, which takes quite a vertical. Is there any responsibility to the owner of that property on the other side of Bay Shore Road, assuming that water is coming from the top of that grade down and under and across into these properties? Are they involved?
Through you, Chair, there's a potential. I feel like there could even be people further up involved. That's the nice thing about the process is it will trace the water back to wherever it starts. So it could be the properties on the other side of the road. It could be someone further up. They're really looking at the drainage area in its entirety and not so much just like one property on one side and then the receivers on the other side. So I don't know until they start doing the work to find out where the water is starting and coming from. But there are generally people involved who you might not think. And the value that is assessed is based on how much you're perceived to use the drain. So, you might end up paying a very small percentage because you have an acre or two and the water comes off your property maybe sometimes, whereas maybe you're the person dumping it all in. So it's all based on where you are in the drainage area, but it may be people on the other side. It could be people further up the road.
Are you ready to vote on this? All in favor of the motion? And it's carried. Thank you. I need a motion to move into committee of the whole at this point. Councillor Bell, seconder, Deputy Mayor Keaveney. Recommendation that be it resolved, the Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby go into committee of the whole at 1:43 p.m. And our first item is the Chief Administrative Officer for the library. The recommendation is that Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford 1, acknowledge receipt of the letter from the Meaford Public Library Board confirming the termination of the 2022 Library Services Agreement, and 2, authorize the Treasurer to transfer an upset limit of $46,500 to the 2024 Library Operating Budget funded from the 2023 Operating Surplus in accordance with the terms of said agreement. Mover and a seconder for this one, Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Forder, both members of the library board. Good. Do we want a report from staff here first, maybe, or?
I don't think I've got much to add to this one. I'm happy to take whatever questions though have come out of the report because it is a bit of an unusual situation.
Did you wish to speak, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I only wanted to ask Mr. Smith, point number 2, we talk about the 2023 operating surplus, and I know we won't see that until the auditors have had a look at our books. So can you enlighten us at all about what that might look like or when we may see it?
I don't, and in the absence of our treasurer, I'm sure the deputy treasurer would look at me very sternly if I said a number, because I don't think we're quite there yet. But suffice to say that we're comfortable with saying that this could come from the operating surplus. If for whatever reason that couldn't happen for some reason, we could take it from a reserve later in the year if we needed to, or just from the 2023 operating budget if there is, salary gapping or unspent things as well.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. Originally, back before we changed things, there was a report from the previous CEO that a CEO was really not necessary in the library. I know we have nothing to do with it, it's the board. What has changed since that comment or report? And are we adding more, are they adding more staff? Can you fill us in on this?
So I think I'll probably actually look to the library board members to maybe give a bit of an answer to that, because obviously this is something that's come from them. I think what's probably a little bit different from our side of things is that when that happened and we changed to this role, we created a manager of library services role, or the library board created a manager of library services role, which hadn't existed previously, to sort of take on some of those leadership roles that a library CEO traditionally does on a day-to-day basis. My understanding, and again, the board members may say something different, is that manager role may not exist after this because the CEO role will in fact replace it. So we're just sort of amending the title and the responsibilities of it, not creating a full additional role. But the board members might want to comment on that.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. In my personal opinion, to completely answer Councillor Bartley's question, we would have to go into closed session. I can. Now that's my feeling. I think there are items from the past that have had a relevance on this current situation. And as I say, I would not feel comfortable discussing them without going into closed session.
I think Councillor Greenfield, that's a really reasonable comment. I think the other thing I'll say on this is it almost doesn't matter. Because the library board can do this within their budget, and this council entered into an agreement with the library board that said if they wanted to go in a different direction, we would return their funding to previous levels. So while as long as the board is making this recommendation based on their feelings of what is necessary to run the library, then I think that we're fairly obligated to do this.
Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Very good points to bring up, Councillor Bartley. So I was actually expecting that, so I wrote a paragraph just so I can make sure that I chose my words carefully. So if you just bear with me a second, I'll just read this out. Appointing a full-time CEO for the Meaford Public Library not only directly supports council's strategic priorities on leading in municipal government and enhancing community services, it is essential for providing focused, effective leadership that enhances library services and directly benefits the community. A dedicated CEO ensures the library adapts to changing community needs, particularly in areas like digital access and educational programming. This role is crucial for overseeing the development and implementation of initiatives that support lifelong learning, digital literacy, and community engagement. And by investing in a full-time CEO, the library can better serve as a hub for information, culture, and social interaction, significantly enriching the quality of life in Meaford and fostering a well-informed, connected community. And hopefully that helps, but thank you.
Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Forder. That's very encompassing. And I agree. I think it is valuable. My only question is, and with hopefully again going back to a closed session scenario, is this preparatory to just get to the point of acquiring that CEO, or, and again, can you answer, is kind of that imminent, or is this just preparatory to take that step towards that.
Yeah, I think that's one that probably can't be answered because as my understanding, and I haven't been part of them, is that the board's only had closed session conversations about that so far.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner, and I apologize for the question. I am a library fan. I pushed to have this library built. I'm a big fan of it. It's just the process that I don't like is we're going to supply a budget, but it's none of our business what they do with it. It's the same as we supply a budget to the fire department, but we do have something to say what they do with it. It's not a Meaford law. It's a province of Ontario law. I understand that. I just don't like it. And I was curious on what was going down. And I don't know if I'll ask for a closed session at a later date, but thank you for your answer.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Ford, for your explanation. Very well chosen words, and that's enlightening. So from my perspective, I look back, and when we did appoint the CAO of the day, Rob Armstrong, to fulfill a role on this board, it was understood at that point in time that, as it says in the report, should Mr. Armstrong no longer be in that position, that things would revert. So understanding that process, I am comfortable with what we're doing here, because we have to recognize too, from Councillor Forder's very detailed reports, I think the increase in attendance at our library has been significant. And as the library grows, they're going to need this kind of leadership. So I appreciate, Brandon, that you outlined a number of the responsibilities of the CEO. So I'm just curious to know then, if we move from a manager to a CEO position, are we comfortable that those duties of the manager, will they be kind of absorbed in the CEO's role, or do we have a vacancy then in the manager's role?
I think, again, that's two things. One is we head towards personal information that should be in closed session, but also is really nothing to do with this council. That's for the library board to determine.
And I'd just like to add, as in my first term as a councillor, I was on the library board, and so I was. I remember the previous CEO of the library. I was there when Mr. Armstrong took the initiative to take over those duties and add them to his existing duties, and I was there when the agreement was struck, and now here I am today. And I would say that the things are unfolding precisely as I foresaw them to unfold, and appropriately in my mind. I think that the library is being extremely well run, being extremely successful, and that we should continue to support it. And this motion, I think, will lead to continued excellence in the way it's being run. Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks again, Your Worship. If I may add, and I don't know if this will ease anyone's tensions or not, but back in September, the library board, with the absence of Mr. Armstrong, the board started to discuss both in open sessions and later in private sessions about the CEO situation and the future of the CEO. Two items that I think are very worth taking into consideration is succession planning at the library, and certainly the manager at this time is very, very involved in that, and realizes that this is going to be a huge item in the future. We have to remember, right now we've got three major residential developments. They're in their infancy, but if you look at the potential of units in Skydown, at Loon Call and Bay Bounds, it's not inconceivable that in the next maybe 3 to 4, at the most 5 years, we could have maybe a couple of hundred more residential developments just in our downtown or outskirts area. That is going to put additional demands on our library. A number of our new residents will be 55 and older, shall we say. A number will be couples with young families. And we have to start planning for that now, for not only for the future of what is a very busy library today and what has turned into a community hub, but we have to start planning for 4 or 5 years in the future. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago when my good friends at Bell disconnected my internet at home. Anyway, I was without internet for 6 days. I went to the library. And when I was there using their internet, I did happen to just glance around a few times at just what was going on in the library, who was coming and going. It's a busy, busy place. It just in the three years it's been open, it has lived up to this reputation as a community hub. And I want to see that continue. And I think with the lady we have in mind to become the CEO, that will continue. Thank you.
Are we close to a decision here? You ready to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We've got another one here. The recommendation is that Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford, number 1, endorse the draft organizational Main Street Meaford bylaws. 2, direct staff to advertise for community members to submit expressions of interest to serve on the board of the directors of Main Street Meaford, replacing municipal staff members. And 3, direct staff to bring applications forward to council for their input on appointments. I need a mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Keaveney and Councillor Urick. Is there any report or anyone want to speak to this? Mr. Voigt?
Thank you, Your Worship. So what you have before you is the I'm not gonna say the finish line, but the closest thing to the finish line for the municipality on our work on setting up a new organization focused on economic development in the downtown. That is the Main Street Meaford Initiative. As you know, that was structured to follow the principles of the Main Street strategy that's been used in Canada and the US for decades, with quite literally thousands of communities having success. And it relies on 4 pillars that allows for it to be a more comprehensive approach to economic development than what we had with the BIA because of the very tight restrictions that a BIA has on its legislation. What you see in the report is an outline of the work that's been done to date by staff, as well as many people in the community. Some participated through ongoing workshops, others participated at events, still others it was with face-to-face meetings and communications, and others just recommending ideas of what might make sense for this moving forward. You'll see in the report the list of the tasks essentially that have been completed to date. And a lot of it is the groundwork or foundation setting. So it maybe from the public viewpoint, it's the kind of the behind the scenes kind of work, but it's just like if you're opening a new business, Before you open the doors, you first have to get your staff ready and have them trained and have your accounting software ready and know who your suppliers are and have your advertising strategy ready and your marketing plan and all your your approach to taxes and all that. So that's the kind of thing that's been happening so far. It's if we take a look at what typically happens with a Main Street organization and the amount of work they can get done, the fact that we were able to do this with the support of citizens in the, let's call it just over a year's time that we've been working on it, it's quite extraordinary because in fact, the kind of work that you've seen done there in many cases can take 2 to 3 years. If we just take a look at, and it's a little bit of a stretch for the analogy, but it does have enough similarities. The great success that we've seen, and I know people around the Horseshoe here are involved with Christmas on the Bay. There was kind of 2 to maybe 3 years of completely behind the scenes figuring out what this would be, and then the launch, and then now the second year in a row and seeing that success. So a lot of work that needs to happen before the thing can be live. And so happy to bring this forward. Essentially, as it outlines there, it's just asking council to take a look at those, the bylaws. They would then be adopted by the current board that we have for the nonprofit organization that the municipality is in control over. We'd ask that council direct staff to advertise for the 4 members of the board of directors. There's 5 in total. We're suggesting that 1 at this time still be a municipal appointee, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then also direct staff to bring applications forward for your input on those appointments. The fact that we've seen so many great folks come forward with the recent call for your advisory committees, I think it's a good time in the community right now. People are stepping up, new faces, new ideas. And I think we'll get some great people applying to this. Again, the idea is that we would have recommendations for citizens that would be on this board, maintaining the 5th seat as a municipal staff appointment, but noting the intent is that this is completely citizen run. And at any time, if they feel that they don't need that direct sort of in-house assistance from staff, that board can at that time change their bylaws and have it that they are fully in control. And then we as a municipality just run alongside them without a member on that board. And I think that would be another wonderful day for them moving forward. You'll see also that there is recommendations that when that board is seated and moves forward, that they come up with their budget and present that to council in request of accessing the funds the council has already set aside, because now it's no longer staff in control of that. And just like with our grant programs and that, I think it's only appropriate that that new board show that they have the capacity and the skills to come up with a budget, the rationale for the spends on there, and then make the request of council to shift those funds accordingly. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Director Voigt, for your explanation of this report and for really the initiative of Main Street for getting that off the ground. So it's going to be great. I'm really excited about it for Meaford. And I also want to acknowledge and thank Graham for all of your work to date as well in organizing meetings and moving this project forward. Rumor has it, as you say, there's some really good people stepping up for this. So I think it's really, really going to be great. I wanted to ask clarification on a couple of things, if I could. The boundary, I know there's been some discussion throughout the year as to what the boundary should be. And I see it's recommended to be the larger area over what some folks who have been really close to this and attending a lot of the meetings have discussed. And I'll give you my second question, I guess, at the same time. I'm wondering how you arrived at 5 as the appropriate number for the board. So basically 4 members of the public, recognizing that there is a lot of committee work to be undertaken. As I've been at meetings and the workload has been outlined, it's significant. So I'm wondering why just 5 on the board if more people step forward that are interested, or can the board be expanded at a later date? Or just wondered if you could speak to the thinking behind both the boundary and the number of board members.
Through your worship. Yeah, so the boundary as you'll see that it is appendix 3 of this. Yeah, we had some discussions about that with folks that were attending some of the workshops, as well as speaking to our sort of friends and colleagues from the US who've been working on this at the national and state level as well to see what works. Essentially what we needed to make sure is that we had an area that and this is referenced in the report, an area that took into account the geographic assets that are related to our downtown Main Street. So it can have, so that we can leverage those for economic development the most. So that included going down to the water. It included the parks that are in the downtown. Some of those folks that were on those workshops did not see that. They didn't recognize that there was that value. And also, equally important is that there was enough of a capacity in terms of what is inside this boundary to move it forward. I think that's one thing that we recognized with the BIA. It was, if this is to one end of the spectrum as being large, the BIA boundary was way far to the other spectrum, very small. And that led to a real capacity issue in terms of how does such a small group of folks leverage their skills, their financial wherewithal and influence to make meaningful change. This allows us to do that. And that actually then relates also even to the question about the board. That's probably the thing that we've bounced around the most. If you look at the recommendations of sort of best practice from a Main Street organization, you're looking mostly at boards of like 7 or 9. However, it becomes difficult then if you have that many people. And again, and maybe the shift has happened now. I did mention that we've seen, I think in total with the pump storage committee and the other advisory committees, what, 70, close to 70 applicants, which is, almost 10 times what we see on some years, right? So like, that's fantastic. So maybe we could have a larger board, but we didn't want this to be, and I'm just going to say like a 9-person board only in name, because then, you have all these vacancies because you couldn't get enough folks. So this seemed reasonable. That means that we have one person for each of those 4 pillars that relate to economic development in the downtown, and then the municipal staff person to help with that consistency as well. Of course, as its own nonprofit, it can change its own bylaws as it sees fit, and enlarge the board, give different positions that's completely within the hands of the citizens as they move this forward. We just didn't want to saddle it with launching and potentially having half the seats sitting vacant. That doesn't look good either.
Councillor Yuri. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for that explanation, Rob. Makes perfect sense. Regarding, I'll go back to the boundary. The only thing I guess I would ask, again, because this is going to be totally driven in-house, so they could presumably also change the boundaries of this as well, because the one thing that we all, as much as there's an urban-rural divide, ironically, we even have an urban divide because we do have on top of the hill a number of businesses who always feel left out. And I know organizations like Summerfest, Christmas on the Bay are always trying to find a way to make that inclusive of that group of businesses as well, because we're not Toronto, we're not that big, so it's not that long a street that you can kind of try and include the neighbors to the south. So presumably they could also hopefully find a way to be inclusive with that as well, if they so chose.
So yes, just on paper, 100%, they could choose to do whatever they want. Again, and I've cautioned folks about this repeatedly. There's a reason we chose this methodology, because it's worked for decades in literally thousands of neighborhoods. If we try to make it the Meaford special way, as opposed to the Meaford context, right, which is Meaford context is how we are, what we are. The Meaford special, if I can make that up, is, oh, we're just going to make it up ourselves because we're going to jerry rig it and go contrary to what we know best practices in this methodology. This is born out of an economic development strategy grounded in heritage preservation of main streets. The further away you go from that, the further you go away from the four pillars, then you're just, you're making something up, and fine, it might be wildly successful, but then you're not following the path that many others have, so that we can also create our own success. So reinventing the wheel, is that something we need to do? No. If the people want to do that, fill your boots, good luck. As municipal staff, and that will be running beside you, trying to help you as best we can. There's method behind the madness, and there's all kinds of ways that we definitely can include other businesses. For example, I'm not saying this is where this organization goes, but there's a lot of Main Street organizations that focus their Main Street on the experience of related to food industries and that. Well, we could obviously do that, and then you would have the food producers that are outside of the Main Street district come in and participate in that way. And there's 100 different variations this organization could evolve into, so that there can be that sharing. Also, the business development component of this, like I've said before, we would expect that would be open to anyone that wants to participate, but first and foremost for the people that are, sort of air quotes, members of this geographic area. It's not about being exclusive in any way. It's about leveraging the unique things you find in a waterfront heritage downtown. It's the waterfront heritage downtown. It's not the downtown that's in the rural area, because it's not there, it's here. So it's about what you have here, working with what you have here, and driving towards to success.
Are we ready to vote on this? I think so. All in favor? Thank you. And we have another one here. The recommendation that Committee of the Whole receive Report Development 2024-09 Federal Economic Development Agency funded grant application for information purposes. Need a mover and a seconder for this, Councillor Bell and Councillor Bartley. Did you wish to speak to it, Rob?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. So you will note as you read through the report, there's a reason I took the long name of it here. This is a program that is being offered, and the program they called is My Main Street. It has literally nothing to do with the last item. It's just because you use the word Main Street doesn't make it the same thing. So just want to make that clear. But it's an opportunity. That's offered by the Canadian Urban Institute, and it's funded by the Federal Economic Development Agency. And it's essentially a placemaking associated economic development funding tool. And so staff had been kind of monitoring this for a while, since it came out last year, and what you see here is the description of what we're calling the project, which is actually a series of initiatives that we would do that relate to the experience of people in the downtown, making it safer, making it more comfortable, making it more enjoyable to walk and cycle to, making parking more convenient and effective for when we look at the potential changes to Market Square or doing a pop-up there next year to test it out. It's also about trying to make that crossing between the splash pad and the beach using traffic calming measures and something artistic there to make that crossing safer and more appealing. I think it's, you know, the reasons for that I think are quite obvious to anyone that's been down there and would be down there with children as a family enjoying our park spaces. And it's also about improving the accessibility of our downtown. We chose these different initiatives because they really highlight the a common theme and kind of multi-pronged approach that the municipality has right now on making our downtown as economically viable and culturally important and a wonderful place to live, because that's where we're seeing also the majority of our growth. As Councillor Greenfield noted, the densest development will have greatest impact on our downtown area. So we've had policies in the official plan that relate directly to this. We've got capital investment planned for the splash pad for next year that relates to this. We've got the municipal or the council priorities of reestablishing Market Square and the downtown public realm focused in the downtown. We've got some initiatives that are in here relating to accessibility that the Accessibility Advisory Committee has noted. So these are all multiple prongs of making sure that we've got this great asset, these great parks, the splash pad and that, and making them better for everyone. And the hope is that we're going to get the grant money. And if not, I know that staff is going to sit down and figure out how somehow we can make whatever pieces of this move forward anyway, because they all, in very many ways, are just the right thing to do to, again, to make the crossings safer and more convenient, to slow the traffic down around our parks.
You're saying
You know.
can do. Thank you.
It's our job.
Yes, go ahead. I'm really excited about this report, but you go for it, Harley.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Mr. Boyd. A couple of things. First of all, from the Accessibility Committee, we have mentioned the last few years about accessible ramps for businesses, portable ones. Certainly would be terrific, and I expect we'll likely remind you of the need for them again this year, and I'm glad they are reported here. If I'm reading this correctly, you mentioned some artwork on the big cement barriers to protect folks on the patios. I'm just wondering, and I'm not suggesting that for this year, but if indeed there was any funding left over, if we could do some kind of recent research that we could provide barriers that in the future that are a little less ominous than the big concrete walls that we put up. Other municipalities have quite lesser barriers up there, and I'm just wondering if that somehow, if there were any funds left, it could be looked into in the future.
And yes, Rob.
Through your worship, yes, other places have found more elegant urbane ways of doing that. Yeah, I remember ours right now, it's a temporary installation on what is essentially a highway, right? So that does change the characteristics. However, you'll see when we bring forward the recommendations for the downtown public realm plan, we would be looking at those kinds of spaces that we're using regularly on these long longer term, but temporary installations, are there better ways that we can do this? Maybe it's a difference in terms of the barriers. Maybe it's actually having sidewalks that are wide enough to support the uses that we're asking of them, as opposed to pretending that the highway space is good sidewalk space. So there's a bunch of different things we can do. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is we got to figure out how.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Greenfield. I'm really excited about this this whole plan, and I think just anything we can do to kind of help economic development and improve downtown. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on page 69. It does talk about creating dedicated on-street parking to augment spaces currently in Market Square. As we know with the Market Square plan, that there are people who have concerns about parking. I just want to try and alleviate that to a degree. If you could just speak a little about what that on-street parking looks like, what the plan for that is.
Through your worship. Yeah, the intent is to I'll take a step back. We have a lot of on-street parking in our downtown that goes unused. We have a combination of on-street parking that's striped and areas that aren't, but still allow for parking. So some of it is just kind of the signaling to the public that you can park here, and adding that striping in those places, right? So there's that. There's also kind of looking at if we take a look at Nelson Street, for example, that is, if I'm not mistaken, the entire stretch of it is county, right? I'm looking over this. Oh, then it is okay, but it's super wide, right? Now there's been some folks. Actually, for example, I was talking to Blake, Lino's son, who's leading the redevelopment of the old fire hall. And, you know, he had some ideas of doing kind of a one-way road down there and kind of talked him out of that because one-way tends to increase traffic speeds and all that, and explained to him, well, that actually is a wide enough cross section there that we can put angled on-street parking and still have enough room eventually to maybe add, you know, a treed boulevard either on the sides. I don't think we would go with something down the center. It's for the marginal increase on aesthetics. It becomes that much more problematic in terms of the health of the trees and that. But it has enough room there to have a lot of parking, to add some greenery, to help create that visual interest with the terminus is the water and our sign down there, right? So right there alone, I think we can get about 40 spots, right? So there are places that we can just do a better job of signaling where the parking is and show that it's not as necessary where it is right now in that valuable real estate. And we're going to be doing throughout the summer and into the fall months, monitoring of the use of the parking in the downtown, as we've done a couple of years ago.
Councillor Forder.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Director Voigt. If it's in the report and I missed it, I apologize, but what is sort of the expected timeline where if you do expect grant approval, when might you be expecting that? And if so, how soon can we start working on achieving some of these goals?
Through your worship, as far as I know from what they've sent out, the timeline of finding out can be days to weeks. Right, so it's fast, but they also expect the monies to be spent within this calendar year, right? So it's fast. As soon as we know, either way, like I said, we will figure out what path we're moving forward. So we have it laid out that it could all be done with the grant funding. If not, we'll just have to look at, okay, how do we resize this? What kinds of things can and should we do to move forward, right? Because there are variations of this that we can execute with just different attention to what we're doing as staff and some of our resources. A lot of it would involve some volunteer help in that, But I think the reason we can do that is because these projects weren't just thought out of whole cloth. They relate to things, like I said, that we've already got investment and policy direction and staff's interest in doing. We know we're going to be upgrading the splash pad. That's only going to make it more popular. So we should be addressing what the traffic in that crossing looks like, right? So these are the ideas that come forward when we're thinking in a more comprehensive approach and understanding how people use our downtown, right? So either way, it will be fast. It'll either be sort of big, fast, or kind of smaller and fast.
Councillor Yorick.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because contractual verbiage matters, on page 68, it does say, in regards to that, it says, as reimbursements against completed work. So am I to understand the way that's written? Are there things that we're already done that we're searching money for? Or when you talked about planning process, then how does it work against completed work if it's not done yet? Or in the parameters of the actual contract of the grant, does it actually say, go ahead, do the work, and then they're going to reimburse you for the completed work?
Through your worship, no, it's not us trying to get money back for things we've done. They have mechanisms in there where you can get a relatively large percentage up front. And then it's kind of a rolling process to get reimbursed, right? So it's not that we have to spend 50% of it up front and then get reimbursement. There is a portion that can come up front. And Graham just texted me that the final notice of date that they had identified was May 31st.
Are there any other questions? Ready to vote? All in favor? And that's carried joyously. Thank you. The next item is recommendation that Committee of the Whole receive report development 2024-10 zoning bylaw update 2024 for information purposes. I need a mover and a seconder, Councillor Forder and Councillor Bartley. Thank you. Discussion on that one or any background, Mr. Voigt?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Denise is here. So this is just an outline of the zoning bylaw update project that is now underway. Again, there's been a lot of preparatory work to get us this far. As you know, this is more for the public viewing audience right now, is that the zoning bylaw helps us implement the official plan. It's there to set the land use regulations. That means that your official plan can be achieved. And we're required to update that when we do our updates to our official plan, which are now done. The intent for this one, as you can see, is really outlined that we're providing that direction in terms of what we want to see coming out of the official plan so that it's achievable. That we're also simplifying some of the provisions in there that create challenges for us and for applicants. Also trying to find opportunities where, let's say there are certain kinds of variances that are sought, an awful lot of the time and are always approved. Well, then perhaps we should just change those provisions if we can, if they make sense, so that people don't need to go through those processes just for the sake of it, if you will. So there's some streamlining there. There's some modernization, a bunch of different things, of course, that relate to our ability to have more options for folks to provide housing in an easier way in our community, particularly addressing infill in that. Codifying some of the recommendations that are in our heritage plan so that it's, for example, building heights that might be affected there, because we want to make sure that you have that structure, which is a little easier to administer than just doing it through the Heritage Act. So a lot of different things like that. What you see in this outline is how we'll be moving forward with the project. And the main stakeholders that we have already identified. Of course, there will be opportunity for public engagement, but we have the the stakeholders identified here in terms of external organizations and agencies that would be involved, and the timeline that we expect to get this done. Denise, as Manager of Planning Services, will be leading this over the remainder of the year. And with her resources as well as mine, other staff, essentially, there will be staff from every other division that at some point in time has to touch this work as well because of what it means in terms of future development. So there's going to be a lot of coordination amongst all the different divisions to get this done. But this helps council understand the work that is the heavy lifting that's about to take place over the next 3 quarters.
Any questions at all? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Director Boyd, for your explanation of the work involved here. And I understand that this is something that has to be completed and that will, once it is done, it will hopefully simplify some of the processes. My concern on page 5, it suggests 1,200 hours, and I'm worried for Denise, recognizing the growth that's upon us, the number of planning applications that you are processing in your department. How are we going to manage this additional workload on top of everything else that is on the desks of the good people in our planning department?
Through your worship, so a couple things. Of course, that is an estimate. It's not going to be at 1,200 hours. We're done. Could take more, could take less, but that is a good estimate on the amount of work. If you take a look at the division of the tasks across the number of staff and that that number may not be as ominous on an individual as if you're just saying, okay, 2 people are going to do this and they each spend 600 hours this year. You got to also remember that we do have the ability with budgeted funds to get external resources to provide some assistance on sort of targeted aspects of this. While this is primarily being done in-house, we are looking at opportunities where if we need particular expertise or to look at the final draft of it to kind of check that in terms of consistency in that, we have those resources as well. Is this going to be an easy task to undertake with the workload we have? No, but it needs to get done, and that's the estimate of the amount of effort that it's going to take.
Any other questions? You ready to vote? All in favor? Again, that's carried. Thank you so much, everyone. There's one more item here. No, we're ready to move on to the delegated authority. Memo is, does that have to be accepted? No, we just, is there any questions about that? Any concerns? Move right on to updates on county council and other committees and boards. I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Keaveney for her report on county council.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. We're a little bit out of sync with county right now because last meeting I had no report and now county has met twice since we've been together. So I'll try and summarize the 2 meetings. So county council met on March the 28th. At that time, Dr. Eyre provided an update and shared that opioid-related deaths in Grey Bruce were similar in 23 to 22. And this is a little bit disappointing considering how hard the health unit and our health system are working to help people with addictions. Grey County paramedic Teresa Thibault was recognized with the Medical Director's Award of Excellence for her work in supporting SOS services in the county. This is SOS is a service where the paramedics go out in the field and meet people where they're at. And this work has been ongoing since the fire really that happened down in Hanover at the boarding house there, and it's really been effective. For the 2nd year in a row, Grey County has been named one of the top 21 intelligent communities in the world. And this is really exciting. And the next step is to see if we make the top 7, and that'll be announced in June. We had a delegation from James Skoniak. He's the Chief Development Officer and Executive VP at Bruce Power. And so he spent some time explaining Ontario's need for power as we move forward. By 2050, it's expected the demand will double or may even triple today's available resources. So Bruce Power is staying laser focused on maintaining current generation sources, hence the life extension refurbishment of the reactors that's underway. And they think even just through that refurbishment of the existing reactors, they can improve the output from 6,300 megawatts to 7,000. And he talked about life-saving isotope production, and that's also a major focus over there at BP. Motion was supported to suggest Roma and Okra consider joining forces. We know they used to come together as one conference and then they split. And now that County Council has voted to just support councillors going to one conference, they're hoping that the two will join forces again. Kim Wingrove presented the county strategic plan for 2024 to 27 entitled Working Together for Success. And all the details of that plan can be found on the county's website. There are 4 pillars within the plan: internal operations and service delivery, building communities for the future, workforce development, and giving everyone a place to call home. County Council met again last Thursday, April the 11th. Councillor Barbara Jo Breen from Southgate has requested support to again run for a position on the AMO board. That will be decided at the conference in August. We had a delegation from Bruce King and Stephen Couchman from the Kalapora Wilderness Association. This is their 50th anniversary this year. We also had a delegation from Peter Dunbar, and this has become quite commonplace at county. People come and talk to us about traffic challenges that they face where they live. And this one concerns the intersection of Side Road 35 and Highway 4 in Grey Highlands. And he suggested some mitigation factors that he thought would improve that situation. Rebecca Denard spoke to the county's climate change initiatives update. She broke that into 4 categories. Green development standards. I think I've spoken to this before. The county's working with 3 other counties to suggest recommendations that will guide sustainable development and construction processes. And this will be submitted to the province with hopes that some of these recommendations will be brought into building code updates. Experimental Acres. This program funds farmers to test new sustainable agricultural practices, such as using wool pellets as a slow-release fertilizer and water retention method, or cross-seeding grasses in a buffer strip. There were a number of really interesting projects there. The third was Community Outreach and Engagement Program. This is working towards developing an adaptation plan, identifying actionable, measurable practices going forward to meet the climate change initiatives approved by Grey County Council. And the fourth, the recommendation is a Green Economy Hub. This is a community-led organization designed to assist businesses with targeted climate change initiatives. A working group has already been established. The year-end transfer report revealed a surplus of 1.8 million for 2023, which brings our one-time funding reserve to 4.5 million. Comparing to 2022, the surplus then was 1.6, and similar to us, a lot of these dollars come from salary gapping. And I think that's really all that I can share that was of major importance, Your Worship, unless you wish to add.
I just think I'd like to share with the council the cooperative farming zone issue and at the county. And I think this is, you can just fill in if I leave something out, but the county had a very good idea, the planning department, when they were updating their plan, and they created a cooperative farming sort of category. And they got an application, and it has now gone to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Instead of, the idea, they were thinking, maybe 4 four farmers, young farmers might get together and build four houses on a 100-acre farm and, get into farming that way. They've got an application for, I forget how many it is, but 3,500-foot homes on 2-acre lots on specialty agricultural land. And the OLT is saying, you made it and we've got to get houses on it. So it's pretty sad. That was a kind of an amazing episode. And the frustrating thing is they want to start working on closing this loophole in their plan. However, they are cognizant of the fact that if they try and do this, before, while the land tribunal is holding court, that they might jeopardize their chances of success. So anyway, quite an interesting story. Did you have anything to add to it?
No one.
Okay, other boards and committees, Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Gray Sauble Conservation Authority met on March 27th. Of particular interest was a legislation change regarding all conservation authorities. Effective April 1st, all 36 CAs, which were previously individual regulations, have been amalgamated into a single regulation. As part of these changes, GSCA needs to implement several new or updated policies or documents, update mapping, and provide communications to partners and the public. While this does not greatly affect the broad scope of their mandate, it does require some quick work to prepare for the changes by April 1st. And I'd like to say congratulations to the GSCA staff for making the necessary preparations on short notice. One of the major changes sees the regulation area limits on provincially significant wetlands reduced from 120 meters to 30 meters. Another significant change is that maximum enforcement and offenses fines have increased up to $50,000, imprisonment up to 3 months, and an additional fine of up to $10,000 per day on which the offense occurs or continues for an individual, and up to $100,000 per offense and an additional fine of up to $200,000 per day on which the offense occurs or continues for a corporation. The GSCA is undertaking a strategic plan for the 2025 to 2035 period, and regional municipal councils and staff are invited to attend one of the upcoming strategic planning workshops. There's one session being held in Meaford on April 29th from 1:30 to 3:30. Unfortunately, that coincides with our council meeting, which precludes the opportunity for council or staff to attend. Alternatively, there is also a session on April 25th from 1:30 to 3:30 in the Bay Room at the Bayshore Community Center in Owen Sound. Finally, the GCA would like to share that the Gray Sauble Conservation Foundation has a series of fundraising events coming up in May to raise funds to support local conservation projects and environmental education. The Earth Film Festival will be held at 7 p.m. at the Roxy Theatre on May 16th. 2 films will be shown, The Water Walker and Becoming Tom Thompson. There will also be a dinner fundraiser hosted by Zach Kishig on May 16th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. It will be held at the Owen Sound Farmers Market and will feature creatively cultivated 3-course indigenous cuisine with local fresh and seasonal ingredients for a unique dining experience. And finally, the Gray Sauble Conservation Foundation will be conducting their annual online auction from May 9th to 23rd, and all items will be on display during the evening presentation at the Earth Film Festival. Please contact the Roxy Theatre in Owen Sound for more information on these events.
Any other reports?
Could I just add, Mayor Kentner, to Councillor Urick's report from Gray Sauble that I have had a message today to say that while they can't change the date of the session at Meaford Hall, clashes with our council meeting, there is a public session that evening also at Meaford Hall, and while not ideal for staff and council to be at that one, they will happily have staff and council at that one if we can't attend any of the specific sessions. I'll get more information out to you over the next couple of days.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion to move out of the committee of the whole. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Forder and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? And that's at 2:43 this afternoon. We have any notices of motion this time, Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a notice of motion I would like to bring forward, but I think before I do that, the Deputy Mayor may have a request to waive our
Procedural.
I don't think we can waive the procedural bylaw until you tell us what the motion's about.
Okay, that's fair. Quickly, it's about arranging some funding for floral displays in the downtown area as a part of the 150th celebrations.
So, are you going to move that motion? Okay. Go
So
ahead.
if the deputy mayor wishes to consider this today as opposed to in 2 weeks like we normally would, then we need a procedural motion to waive the procedural bylaw to allow for immediate consideration of this motion. And then we'll need the text of the motion.
If I may, your worship, I would ask for council's indulgence in approving the request to deal with this today, just from the perspective that things need to get ordered for the sesquicentennial celebrations upcoming this year. We recognize that there are some decorating materials that will really enhance the downtown that will play into this request, along with some planter boxes that would be placed on either end of the Sykes Street Bridge with removable inserts so that they'll be very easy to work with going forward. These inserts can just come out and be taken to whichever greenhouse is providing the flowers that particular year. I know there was a question about, who's going to look after them in upcoming years. And I think we can always count on volunteers to step forward if needed to assist with whoever is hired in the horticultural department. But I do ask for your indulgence today to move forward with the motion. And Councillor Greenfield, if I may, I believe you're asking for $20,000. That would allow the committee to, as I say, purchase 5 very large metal black boxes, again, that will be placed on either end of the bridge that will really enhance the downtown core. And what we're feeling right now is that there's nothing really in the downtown recognizing that this is the 150th anniversary of Meaford, which is an incredibly special occasion. So we want to put some ruching on the balconies at Meaford Hall, and there'll be flags and bunting and other sorts of things. But this funding is really specifically for the flower boxes, the flowers that will go in them, and will also allow us the indulgence of purchasing a few other decorating items.
So we're going to need a mover and a seconder, first of all, for the procedural change. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Forder and Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion? All in favor? To talk about, yes. Okay. And that's a majority. Okay. So now proceed.
Okay, thanks, your worship. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Keaveney. If you will follow through with me, whereas the council of the municipality of Meaford has unanimously supported the celebratory occasion of the town of Meaford's 150th anniversary, whereas the town of Meaford has historically adorned its downtown area with attractive floral arrangements. Whereas the 150th Celebration Committee firmly believes attractive flower displays will glorify and enhance the urban area for the enjoyment of local residents and visitors throughout the year's celebrations. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve a maximum allowance of $20,000 to provide funding for additional flowers and containers to be placed in strategic urban locations. And be it further resolved that these monies be withdrawn from an approved source and forwarded to the 150th Financial Committee, and the request be not recognized as an indication of any future annual commitment.
And we need a seconder for that, right? Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Some discussion, or did you want to explain anything more? I think
No.
you've
no,
explained
open
it
for
fine.
discussion.
Any questions, Councillor Barkley?
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. So are you talking a steel box to hold flowers at over $4,000 each? Is this what you're asking? That's what I got out of it.
I'm sorry, no, that's the main expense is the flowers. The flowers themselves, or at least a good chunk of that amount.
But the 20,000 isn't just for these 4 flower boxes, it's for other things?
No, it's for the flowers and the containers. That's how I understand it.
And Deputy Mayor, can you?
Your worship, if I may clarify to the best of my knowledge, there would be 5 planters purchased, and they are large and they are black metal. The majority of the expense is those planter boxes that we will have in perpetuity for many, many years to come. They are a grand total, I don't have the exact number with me, they are a grand total of $13,000 and change. And the flowers to fill them, I understand, are around 2,000. And then that would allow the committee the additional funds that are left to purchase other decorating type materials to identify the 150th.
Matt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think just because I feel like I should, a couple of questions on this because I haven't been part of the sesquicentennial conversations in recent weeks. Is there a budget for the $25,000 that the municipalities already contributed to? Because I think with sort of, we can obviously put more money to this, but without knowing what it is that the current money is being spent on, I'm a little queasy about just allocating additional funds. The other concern that I think we have is that if we're buying large boxes to go out there, then it is not a 1-year thing. We will have those boxes that will need to be filled every year in the future. And if flowers are a significant cost, which they are, then we just need to recognize that that will likely result in a budget increase for next year. We have $20,000 in the budget, of which $8,000 is annual flowers already. But if we've got to do large other boxes on bridges, then we're not going to leave those empty for the future. So they'll always have to be sort of maintained and kept up. So just a little confused about why this is in addition to the 25,000 and then what the future plan is.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I can speak to this. Yes, there was $25,000, which the committee is very grateful for, which has been invested in a number of things. First, there was the March 10th event at the community center, which was really, really successful. On June the 15th, there is a parade. There are 2 marching bands coming. They're each an expense, for an example, of about $1,500, and there is an event planned for the harbor for the afternoon of June the 15th. And there are a number of different activities happening there, which, many of them have an expense, things like, a magician, buskers, this kind of thing. And there'll be a food truck, which isn't any cost to us, but there are a number of games and exhibits and so on coming that day. So that total expense is expected to be around 7,000. There were the bales purchased that were handed out on March the 10th. We'd like to purchase some more of those. They have become quite a souvenir from the 150th. There was a contribution towards the information boards at Meaford Hall that the museum did, and those have been to Grey Roots, and now they've traveled to Toronto. So that's really special. There will be on the civic holiday weekend a movie, a big screen outdoor movie that will be happening that evening, which is a cost of about $3,000. There's been promotion on the radio and newspaper and so on, promoting all of these events. We've also supported some events in Bogner. They're doing a tea out there. There are flags that are coming. I didn't bring my whole list with me, but I'm trying to remember all the additional things. A number of our local organizations have requested funds to do a particular event. For example, this one sticks in my mind because I can't believe I didn't know this for all my years in business. There is a National Vanilla Ice Cream Day. And the curling club is going to have an event with vanilla ice cream cones. So there is a long, long list of events going on that are being partially funded by the $25,000 that has come to this committee. So as we get into the months upcoming, we're going to start to see a lot of things happening. And as I say, we're trying to do this up in a really big way, and it's felt with all these things going on that we would just like to have some beautification in the downtown, which brings in the request for these flower boxes that will absolutely be beautiful. And I'm hoping council will consider this. The funds can come from whichever reserve parks perhaps, or from the surplus, which we haven't seen yet, but which I believe will be adequate enough to cover this request.
Can I just inquire, do you know how much has actually been raised through sponsorships? Because I think that it's my impression anyway, that there are sponsorships that have pretty much equalized what the municipality has put in to date.
There are sponsorships of approximately 16 or about 16,000. Very grateful for Jesse Fulton and 365 Sports, who stepped up to do a lot of printing for us and providing flags and other items to the committee. They've really been terrific. And a number of businesses have given, small amounts of money, whatever they can. But yeah, we're very grateful for all of that in kind support, because the reality is, it does cost a lot of money to put an event on of this nature. And for anyone who was at the March 10th, I think you can speak to what a really terrific day that was. And the June 15th will be equally, if not even more special, just because there's more happening and it'll be outside. So this, as I say, it's a one-time thing, this 150th, and we want it to be memorable, and we want to do it right. So unfortunately, that does cost some money.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. I don't travel over the Sykes Street Bridge as often as I do the three bridges in Owen Sound. They have the boxes and they're absolutely gorgeous. It just changes your aura as you drive through town looking at these boxes. I'm in support of these boxes. What I'd like to know is, has it been sole sourced for the price of these boxes, or has it gone out to different places?
There is, through you, your worship, the Sesquicentennial Overarching Committee now has a number of subcommittees that are working on a lot of different things. The parade committee, the June 15th afternoon event, there's a finance committee, there's a decorating committee, a flowers committee, there's promotions committee. A lot of people are really working hard on this. So yes, the particular committee who has worked on this have sourced 4 different companies to find the best price for the boxes.
Through Mr. Mayor as well, and I'm going to look to you and to the Deputy Mayor, because I think your memories may be better than mine. I think that when that bridge was replaced a couple of years ago, the Heritage Committee specifically said they did not want flower boxes on that bridge.
No, that's not right.
No?
No.
There's a story there somewhere. I remember that much.
Well, you're on the Heritage Committee. Do you remember that? I certainly don't. No.
I know we went backwards and forwards about the bridge about 6
No.
times between council and the Heritage
I
Committee, and there was
flowers-
something.
I believe the flowers are on the light posts.
Yeah.
That they didn't want to redo.
Your worship, I was on the Heritage Committee at that point in time. And the decision was, yes, that the flowers would be hung from the lamp posts, but these flower boxes are not attached to the bridge. They will sit on the sidewalk because that was the decision at the time, and you can't now put those types of flower boxes they have in Owen Sound and Thornbury on that bridge, but we can have boxes sitting on the ground that will be equally beautiful.
I don't think the sidewalks there are wide enough for
Oh,
us to put
they're
flower
huge.
boxes.
They're huge. They're, Yep. Justice, Matt, a lot of people working on this, and please don't pour cold water on all the efforts that people are going to celebrate this. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just because it's us who are be maintaining them. So my question is, are these boxes, the black ones, the same or different than the ones on the bridge? Sorry if that seems silly. I just want to understand.
And your worship, through to Director Wiley. I'm sorry, I don't know. I haven't actually seen. I can find out, but I don't know specifically if they're exactly the same.
It's my probably miscommunication. My apologies. Is it the bridge has its own boxes and these black boxes are on top of it, or are they the same? Is it the same number?
There are hanging baskets on the bridge from the lampposts.
Okay.
And whether that's a municipal project, and I imagine that would happen as well as these. I don't know, but I imagine that. Councillor Bell, you had a comment or question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Deputy Mayor, you mentioned that there is a committee on finances. Has this committee done a big umbrella look? Because I think this is heading to $100,000.
If I may speak, your worship, I would say no, there's no concern of these expenses getting to 100,000. I mean, if we look at the contributions of the municipality, the 25, and we're asking for an additional 20, 45,000, and I can swear to you that is the last ask from this committee of the municipality. Yeah, sure, it would be easy to spend 100,000, but that's absolutely not the intent. This would be the final ask.
Councillor Yuri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quick question, Deputy Mayor Keaveney, the merch that was purchased, the clothing and whatnot, I don't know, did that actually come out of the 25? Because that's actually even going to make more money back for the municipality, or did that come out of the municipal coffers? I wasn't even sure on that.
Your worship, if I may respond to Councillor Yuri, that is a separate item that was ordered through the municipality, and the municipality is looking after the inventory and the sales of the merchandise, and whatever profits they are come back to the municipality.
Correct. Good. So that's an offset. So that's good. The last thing I was going to do was a comment, less than a question. And I just think I agree with Councillor Bartley. When you drive through, I don't drive through Owen Sound as much as I do Collingwood or Thornbury. But again, the curb appeal of their bridges with the flowers is pretty spectacular. And I just think that's one thing that we tend to fall a little bit short of is our curb appeal from that perspective of trying to beautify the town. Looking at Mr. Voigt's comments about Main Street, what will be done hopefully to kind of augment, I think $20,000 to put the boxes in place once, and then to purchase flowers in perpetuity. I think that's a small price to pay for trying to beautify our town to the kind of standard that a lot of our neighboring communities do. So I'd be in favor of this.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So these boxes that are going to get made, we're going to store them and keep them and so on. And since the committee seems to be quite blessed with people who have lots of good ideas, can we have the committee look into using those boxes at, the festive season at the end of the year, because we've had a lack of lighting, we've had a lack of festivity. Could we have that group look into that for the future to do something with them? So they're not just tucked away after July and August? That's just something I'm thinking about the boxes.
And through your worship to Councillor Bell, I think that's a great idea. I think that will depend on placement and whether the sidewalk plow could get around, but they would be absolutely stunning with, decorative evergreen displays at Christmas time and with lighting. And just to add, and Jessica will correct me if I'm wrong, the lampposts downtown are now repaired. And the committee is looking into string lighting for the lampposts, because as we mentioned, Thornbury in particular, we all are in awe of how beautiful that lighting is. So we would like to see, at least in the downtown core, those lights in place, if not for summer, at least for the fall and winter months. So there's a huge effort being made in terms of beautification through the auspices of the 150th for that particular section of our downtown.
Are we ready to vote on this? All in favor? Thank you very much. And now we have another notice of motion, or a motion that is coming forward. I guess we need a mover and seconder for your land acknowledgement motion. So you're going to move that,
I will, your worship.
and you're going to second it, Councillor Greenfield. Thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, your worship. And I think we have spoken to this request, but I want to focus on the educational component of this and what I hope will be a really interesting and informative session if we're able to get the individual that spoke at County Council who can really help us understand where perhaps our current acknowledgement is correct or where it might be lacking, and how we can improve upon that language so that it's really, correct and appropriate for this point in time for acknowledging our Indigenous peoples. So I'm hoping Council will support going forward with this, so at least we can have the education and then come back and do a fulsome review of our current land acknowledgement.
So, are we going to read the motion? It's not necessary. Okay, very good. Any discussion of the motion? Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. I'm looking to Matt. Matt, do you know how, is there going to be a big cost to this to delve into this? Does the county already have a position on this? Or I don't think the federal government can't figure it all out without going through courts. How deep are we diving into this?
I think that depends on what council wants. We didn't spend a penny when the last land acknowledgement was developed, because we just did that internally with a group of people and consulted with some of the local First Nations and Métis Nation. Inevitably bringing somebody in to give some training will cost us something. I don't know what that is until we try and find that out. But I don't think we would be looking to spend particular amounts of money on this, because I think Grey County have just updated theirs. My understanding is that the person giving the training at County Council made some comments that I think are insoundably Mountains had both got good land acknowledgements. So I think we would probably just look to something similar.
Thank you, but I'm more concerned about the legality of it, not about somebody's opinion that this is the way it should be. Our speaker tonight has brought up two different treaties that basically say it's not right. So how deeper we're going to dig into this?
Again, that very much up to you guys. My opinion, and it is only my opinion, is that there is no legal standing to a land acknowledgement at all. This is a truth and reconciliation effort to recognise where we as a community are and who came before us. But saying something in a land acknowledgement doesn't, in my opinion, bind us to anything. We absolutely can go out and get legal opinion on things like that, but yes, if we are going to do stuff like that, then it's going to start costing money.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if perhaps the deputy mayor would read her notice of motion. I think it's been well worded, and I'd imagine maybe there are people out there in Rogers Land that might like to hear it, and then I would like to make a comment after.
Right.
With your worship's permission. Whereas Council of the Municipality of Meaford adopted a land acknowledgement policy through bylaw 2021-76. Whereas Grey County and other local communities have recently reviewed their land acknowledgement to take account of new best practices. And whereas Council wishes to support healthy reciprocal relations which are key to reconciliation with First Nation communities. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby directs staff to arrange for land acknowledgement education to be provided to Council and staff by a member of a First Nation, and direct staff to bring forward a report with an updated land acknowledgement following said education.
Go ahead, Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I think the word First Nations, I think that's the most important part, or one of the most important parts of this notice of motion. I think this is a First Nations decision as to whom could or should be included. I'm not a learned historian, but I remember reading about the early exploration of Samuel de Champlain and his guide, who apparently did all the exploring, and since his guide was illiterate, he had Champlain wrote everything up, for better or worse. But they talk about the Hurons and the Petuns. That's early 1600s. There may indeed have been other tribes here prior to that. It's going to be very difficult to get, the exact indigenous tribes named in this. I mean, it's absolutely essential. Yes, we do the recognition. I have no problem with that. But just the question of how much is this going to cost? How much is it going to take? It may be something we can never really nail down and be satisfactory for everyone.
I would just like to make a point to Council that historically there is absolutely no question that the First Nations people who were displaced by the settlers in this part of the world were Chippewas living in and around Owen Sound, where there was a sizable community, and they were ultimately, banished to the Cape Croker area. They are also the only First Nations that are put another way, these are the First Nations people most likely to benefit from the Ontario Pump Storage Project should it go forward, because they are in closest proximity, and they also have some of their members who are actually in the business of designing and building the infrastructure that will go in the water in this project. And in terms of the difficulties that some First Nations people have, the only near neighbors we have who experience these difficulties and therefore benefit sometimes from our social programs that we all pay for are the people living at Nainishimig and also in Saugeen Shores. So for those reasons, I feel that it's necessary for us to establish that there is nothing intrinsically wrong with our present acknowledgement. And I believe the best source of information on that would be the legal firm that has dealt with the claims from those two communities. And I think that we should be able to get a without spending money, get an opinion from that law firm as to the appropriateness of our present land acknowledgement. Go ahead, Matt.
I think to Councillor Greenfield's point, this is something that's very complicated. We are a group of people who are very demographically similar sat in this room. And we do not have the history there. You may remember, and I think it was the last term of council that approved the land acknowledgement, that at the time we had fairly different responses about what should be included in the land acknowledgement from our neighbours at Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and from Métis Nation. And so our land acknowledgement as it was somewhat of a compromise between some fairly divergent opinions on what should be included and what shouldn't. So I think we can ask lots of people, but lots of people will give us different answers. I think that truth and reconciliation is very important. My personal opinion is that us reciting a land acknowledgement once a week doesn't do a lot if we're not going to do other things. So we can do as much or as little as we want to in terms of looking into this. There will always be interpretations. I think to Councillor Bartley's point about the legal status, and I maintain I don't believe there is a legal commitment as part of a land acknowledgement from us, but there is also no legal commitment from any First Nation that they have to agree with our land acknowledgements or not claim land that is part of Treaty X or Treaty Y. I think, I'll say this as the Brit who is sat here. A lot of the treaties were signed with whoever the British told them had to turn up for that treaty, whether it was the appropriate people or not. And so I think if we want to move forward with an updated land acknowledgement, I think it's absolutely fine. I think we would look at very similar ones to what Grey County have done recently, because I don't think we have any reason not to. But we could spend a lot of time looking into this if we really wanted to.
Don't see any more discussion on the matter. Are we ready to vote? Let's do that. All in favor of this motion? That is carried by a majority of 5-2. We have council meetings to adopt here. Recommendation be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby adopt the minutes of the council meetings held on March 25th, 2024, and the closed meetings held on March 25th, 2024. Mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Uhrig. Any errors or omissions? Otherwise, all in favor? Carried. Is there anything on the communications agenda that anyone wishes to raise? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The letter from the Minister of Infrastructure, and there was comments about yourself in an engagement. If you could talk to us a little bit about how successful that was for infrastructure and money.
Sorry, I mean, you said that.
When I read that you had an engagement.
Oh, yeah, we did. We met with the
and
minister.
it was a good conversation.
It was
money about the wastewater treatment plant.
Exactly.
All the millions that are available.
And she wrote to us specifically to encourage us to apply, and has reminded everyone of the deadline, which is this Friday. And I have assurances from Mr. Smith that we have an application that will arrive by Friday.
Absolutely. We're currently working on that and it'll be submitted on time. The cynic in me about this letter will say that we did that at the end of January. It arrived at the start of April, miraculously 3 days after the province announced more budget for that grant program, rather than as an actual response to our deputation particularly.
Okay, any other questions or any other items on the communications agenda? Nothing, that's fine. Then let us move on. We are going to need a closed session this afternoon, and I'll call for a mover and a seconder in a moment. Be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford does now go into a closed session at 3:18 p.m. with the interim CAO and deputy clerk in attendance to discuss personnel matters about identifiable individuals, municipal or local board employees, and specifically candidates for appointment to our advisory committees. So mover and a seconder for that?
Before you get a mover, with your indulgence, council, I'd like to ask that any of my colleagues sat around the table who wish to stay and talk about committee appointments do so. They're not named in the motion, but
Sorry.
if you're happy to do that, then we will do that as well.
That's fine. Any comment from council? Everybody's agreeable to that? Perfect. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder then. Sorry, I did not hear that. Maybe just as well. It's moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Urick. I saw your hand. And so we will move behind closed doors to select these nominees, and we'll be back at the conclusion. Thank you. Reporting out of our closed session this afternoon, we discussed candidates for appointment to our advisory committees, and that was all we discussed. And with that, I'll declare today's meeting adjourned.